Vel Phillips' Dream Big Dreams is funded in part by the Greater Milwaukee Foundation, Harvey E. and Harriet V. Vick Fund, Helen Bader Foundation, EVU Foundation, the charitable arm of the Capital Times, Wisconsin Humanities Council, with funds from the National Endowment for the Humanities, Brewers Community Foundation, Milwaukee chapter of the Lynx Incorporated, and Friends of Wisconsin Public Television.
On an overcast day in August 1967, 200 men, women, and children marched across the 16th Street Viaduct in Milwaukee. On the other side of the bridge, thousands of white residents were waiting. They shouted racist taunts, hurled firecrackers, rocks, and bodily fluids. Although they were battered and scared, the activists marched again the next night, and the next, and the next. The marchers demanded what they believed was a basic right, the freedom to live in any neighborhood regardless of the color of your skin. They called it open housing. The public struggle for open housing in Milwaukee had started 5 years earlier when one woman decided it was time for a change.
You are aware, gentlemen, that the eyes of the nation, indeed, the eyes of the world, are upon Milwaukee.
Her name was Vel Phillips.
It was like, this is my work.
She did things that were unheard of for her time.
Vel Phillips was the first African-American woman to graduate from the University of Wisconsin Law School, the first African-American and first female alderman in Milwaukee, the first African-American judge in Wisconsin, the first African-American and first female to be elected to statewide executive office in Wisconsin or anywhere in the United States.
This is huge. It's just remarkable. She surprised a lot of people.
But for a time, Phillips nearly lost everything that she had worked a lifetime to achieve.
Big mistake. It was not a wise thing to do.
Vel Phillips combined a fierce commitment to her principles with an aristocratic grace. And in the end, she forced her city and her country to come closer to the ideals that motivated her life.
When we measure it all up at the end of the day, Vel Phillips is a great hero.
My mother would always tell us, if you really want it, don't dream small dreams, dream big dreams.
In August 1967, 200 activists marched across the 16th Street Viaduct in Milwaukee, demanding the right to live in any neighborhood in the city. Among them, the NAACP Youth Council, Father James Grappi, a Catholic priest, and the Commandos, a self-defense group from the inner core.
You march across that bridge, and on the opposite side, there is a mass of white people. Angry white people, letting you know that you're in the wrong part of town at the wrong time of day.
Residents hurled bricks, bodily fluids, and racial slurs.
The size of the crowds is mind-blowing, and it's just so vicious and violent and ugly. It's hard to minimize it.
The police began throwing tear gas and creating dense plumes of smoke. It was just mayhem and pandemonium. At that point, I thought to myself, this is absolutely nuts.
Vel Phillips was not among the marchers. She watched the confrontation from home on the nightly news.
It was stunning. It was horrible.
The next day, Milwaukee Mayor Henry Meyer tried to restore order.
And I urge those who live in the area of March to please stay off the streets.
I came home from City Hall, and I just sat down. I just had a good cry.
Vel needed the marchers. She needed coverage to put pressure on the Common Council to pass an ordinance.
With the ban on marches in place, Phillips was back to where she began in 1962.
We were so disillusioned.
She joined Father Groppe and other open housing activists for a rally at St. Boniface Parish.
This was a large church. It probably sat 1,000 people. And it was packed, standing room only.
Speaking to the crowd, Father Groppe asked if they were ready to march. The crowd shouted its approval. But Phillips hesitated. She was a lawyer and an officer of the court. If she marched in the face of the ban, she would be in full defiance of the law.
Now the line has been drawn. You either have to be at this side and support them or you're not. And it's very, very violent out there in the streets. And being in a position of power, she's this official member of the Common Council. She's a part of the middle-class black leadership. It would have been easy for her to not go down into the street. It would have been defended and justified by a whole lot of powerful people.
But I was fed up at that time.
Despite the fear and despite the counsel from some very close to her, she makes a different choice, which shows that she has gone to a very different place than many other black middle-class leaders have.
Because it was for my fair housing, I felt nothing was going to stop us.
Vel Phillips, Father Groppe, and the rest of the crowd defied the mayor's edicts and took to the street.
The decision was made to march. The St. Boniface was on 11th and Clark. We got as far as 9th and North Avenue, so that's about 6 blocks. And the police closed in and started to arrest people. Vel Phillips was one of the first arrested.
And they treated you like you weren't a real person, feeling all over you, and they patted you down. It was just demoralizing.
Phillips was released the next morning, but her mother, Thelma, was not happy with her daughter's jail time.
Oh, gosh, she was embarrassed. What would I tell my friends? I said, Mom, just tell your friends that your daughter is doing what she thinks is best in her capacity as a member of the Milwaukee Common Council.
She marched again that night.
I think that's when she got her reputation for being very brave and tough.
The white community became increasingly violent.
For the most part, there was a backlash. How dare they do this to our city?
Everyone in official power starts to say this is not acceptable, we can't have this. They're forced into that position because these images, again, are going not just in Milwaukee, but they're going across the country. It's an embarrassment to the city.
The open housing activists kept up the pressure.
It's the idea among a lot of young people, myself included, was we're going to make the world better.
It was a close-knit feeling. We all looked out for each other.
If you look at the pictures of the time and the look on her face, you can see a sense of belonging.
She had fought this lonely crusade for a long time, and there was something that was welcome to her. There's a sense of connectivity, a sense of being a part of the struggle.
I was trying to figure out how I really felt. It was like, this is my work.
In September, after 2 weeks of daily marches, the Common Council again voted 18-1 against the open housing ordinance. Phillips had run out of patience.
It's quite apparent to me that the members of this honorable body, to put it in the terms of my commando friends, these cats are just too dumb, just too dumb to know when they have something going for them. It's bad enough to have to deal with a bigot, but when you got a dumb bigot.
While Vel Phillips remained on the front lines of the housing protests, her husband Dale kept the home running, cooking, cleaning, and raising their 2 boys.
My father, in some ways, was an early Mr. Mom.
He always did floors, did whatever cooking, whatever was necessary. He just wasn't hung up on roles. He was just a solid Midwest guy.
He was very secure. He was a good lawyer. He didn't feel that he was competing. He knew that I loved what I was doing, and he wanted me to be happy.
They're, I think, truly a team in a real sense. A lot of these teams, the man is the person of power, and it's the supportive woman, the Coretta King or Malcolm X's wife. And here we have the woman being the one who's out front and achieving the power and the position and things with the very supportive husband.
The growing media exposure brought unwanted attention to Vel's home. There were phone calls.
This man, he would call and say, "I'm watching you. I think the black people like yourself should go back to Africa, where you came from." It was scary, and I wondered if we should get some guards or something.
She received hate-filled letters.
This letter said, "P.S. If you see brown streaks, that's because I used this for toilet paper before I sent it to you." And I had it in my hand. I just dropped it like that.
Then a shot was fired into her kitchen.
The bullet landed right in the middle of the oven door.
When a bullet comes through a window in your home, she could have said, "I'm done." Who's going to blame her? That's threatening on a whole different level. You could become a crusading leader and be willing to die for the cause, and nothing will deter you. But if we say we're going to go kill your kids, that's an act of terror that happened there.
Things were really dangerous. And that's when I sent the children to my mother. She was living in California at the time. They'd say, Michael especially, "Mama, why don't you come to California?" Just such a sad time.
The open housing marches went on for 200 days, continuing into early 1968.
There was a core of people who were there night after night.
To come every day, like clockwork, like it was a job, for over 200 days. This little white man said, "I'm very confused. What is it that you people want?" And I said, "Just say America is a big pie. We want a piece of the pie. We want a piece of America." And he looked stunned, and he said, "That's all?" I said, "Well, that's a great deal if you don't have it."
On April 4th, 1968, the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. Soon after, President Lyndon Johnson and Congress passed the Civil Rights Act of 1968. It included legislation that for the first time specifically outlawed housing segregation.
Milwaukee is critically important to the passage of that national Civil Rights Act of 1968, the Fair Housing Act. Walter Mondale cites from the Senate floor Milwaukee as an important case of how important the issue is and the need for change.
In response to the new federal law, Milwaukee's Common Council approved a citywide open housing ordinance. 6 years after she first introduced the ordinance, Alderman Phillips had finally won.
Of course, it was just mind-boggling and wonderful to know that we really had it.
These are heroes. Milwaukee heroes, Wisconsin heroes, and American heroes that deserve their place in the national narrative. If we care about justice and equality, all of us should embrace Vel, Father Grappi, the Youth Council, the Commandos, and everyone who came out to support that.
My mother would always tell us, if you really want it, don't dream small dreams. Dream big dreams.